welcome to Vibe and Shine, the podcast where prosperity meets personal growth. I'm Krista. I support ADHD mamas and help them clear the clutter. Can we do that over again? Because I'm trying a new thing. Thank you.
The mental clutter.
That's a lot of words. Oh, just start. We don't need the music, right? Okay. Thanks. Welcome to Vibe and Shine, the podcast where prosperity meets personal growth. I'm Krista. I support ADHD mamas clear mental clutter by getting clear on what matters, ditching the shame, and working with their brains, not against them.
And I'm Jessica, your growth-minded guide who helps you align with the most inspired and intentional and inspirational version of yourself in both life and business.
So in each episode, we are going to dive into the mental shifts. Today. Each episode, we'll dive into mindset shifts, strategies, and business insights that fuel success while keeping alignment and well-being at the center. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or someone on a journey of self-discovery, this is your space to grow, thrive, and create a life by design.
Are you aware of your masculine and feminine energies when it comes to wealth creation? Many people struggle to understand the differences when it comes to money. Today, we'll dive into what sets them apart and strategies to implement them at the right times to create a more aligned and intuitive financial future for yourself.
So today we're going to talk about 3 different key points. The first being masculine and feminine energy, understanding the core principles of feminine and wealth building, and when and how to use the feminine energy for the most authentic prosperity. I am super excited to talk about this today because Jessica and I always meet beforehand, and not only do I learn a lot, but it's really cool to see how I've used the masculine energy in my life and the feminine energy in my life. So let's dive in.
And how you can further use it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a common misconception hearing the words masculine and feminine often go right to, in our minds, gender specific. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. Feminine and masculine energy is present in all of us. It's just to what degree is the question. So everyone has elements of both, and it's more common for men to have masculine energy predominantly, mm-hmm. and women to have feminine energy predominantly. But in order for us to create the kind of success that we probably imagine for ourselves, we have to learn how to tap into which energy at which point in time. So I don't know if you want to go into a little bit on the masculine energy and maybe describe some of the characteristics that are really present, with that whole concept, and then I'll dive into a little bit on the feminine side.
Sure. So the masculine energy is characterized by action or more of a structure and logic based. It's very linear, and it's the driving force behind goal setting or decision making, and providing stability. So this energy is often associated with traits like assertiveness, independence, analytical thinking, and it thrives on direction and purpose, focusing on achieving results and creating order. So for me, an example of this for me is I really have found a house that I am quite smitten with. And normally I would be in my feminine energy, and we'll get into that. But I really want this house. And so I am very focused. I am very assertive and driven to get this house. So I find that my masculine energy comes out even more now. Do you have an example of when it's showed up for you or when it shows up?
Yeah, I would say to counter that, like what are some of the feelings that you have when you're in that space?
There are a lot.
Yeah. Do you feel like powerful and, courageous?
Yeah, very much so. The goal oriented, like very driven to that specific goal, right? So directed towards that. And the feelings that come behind it are, I don't know, a lot of different feelings come up within that.
Do you think you're more so per se in your head with that kind of like you really feel it in your head versus maybe in touch with your body?
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great example. For me, it's when I'm in a go mode where I just need to get things done and it just has to be done today, like in whatever way I can make that possible. So that's kind of how I feel my masculine energy present the most. It is very powerful. It's definitely directive and assertive, but it's not like mean in any way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of clear that up. There's an intention behind it. And then for the feminine side of things in comparison, I mean, it's really the opposite of the masculine. So there's a lot of traits that are very different. With the masculine side of things being more linear versus the feminine side of things being very cyclical. And if we think about, before we even dive into the characteristics of it, but the cycles of women naturally, right? We're on a month-to-month basis. We have hormones that play a role every single day that are different. And with that being said, we tend to have the most success as in our feminine energies when we follow that flow of our natural cycle. And so a key differentiator between that and the linear side of things, where most men these days, comparing to having masculine energy the most presently, is that the hormones stay the same, right? So the connection with the body itself is much different each day. And so to have that structure, to have that built up, calendar worth of bang, 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 I'm going to do all these things, that feels more aligned a lot of times to people who are heavy in their masculine energy. So a lot of times men, but some women too. Whereas the free-flowing kind of having room and space for maybe a sporadic event for a woman might feel a little bit more aligned, where there's no pressure, there's no force, and there is a little bit of boredom per se in routine. And I found that really present for me. So, without further explanation in that category, going into some of the characteristics for feminine energy being, embodying many things. So intuition is probably the biggest thing. Something I've learned over time to really embrace and listen to, because in today's society, we often shut it down and we don't like to listen to it because it goes against the grind hustle mode of everything else that society says we have to do to be successful.
Yeah.
The creative side, the emotional expression. When someone is in their feminine energy, they're creative and they're embracing that to the fullest capacity. And so that's really, something that I've tried to implement into my daily work. Something where I can take, a couple hours out of my week to work on podcast material, because that makes me feel creative. And then actually expressing it with my voice. And, I'm not nose deep in a book or on a client meeting or something like that for every single hour of the day. And in turn, that helps to create, better outcomes for me. So, and then, more so with the embracing flow and receiving is, what's most heavy for the feminine energy rather than masculine. So masculine is more giving and feminine is more receiving. So if you're always in give, provide, protect mode, you're not allowing yourself to receive. And when we talk about wealth creation, which we'll get into, how are you going to receive wealth if you're not open to it and receptive? So where's an example in your life that you think you've used your feminine energy? I mean, I've touched on a couple of mine.
A lot. It's interesting to look at the house situation and think about how while I do use the masculine energy, I also recognize that the feminine energy has to come into play because getting things done by force long term, it doesn't work. If
Yep.
like you said, like consistently giving, the word burnout comes up. That's what I think of. And so I think at one point I recognized like I need to be more receptive to, hey, if this house doesn't actually work out, then maybe like how can I kind of go with the flow, for lack of a better term. But also at the same time, I think my intuition came into play. Like this house is going to be awesome for my family in so many different ways. So that feminine energy came into play, I think, to begin with.
Right.
And then the masculine energy kind of came in to say, hey, let's push for this because I think it's a really good idea. And then going back to the feminine energy. So, I mean, like we said, it's cyclical,
Right. Kind of plays like a transformation between the whole bringing the idea, having the concept of the idea to bringing it into action and then further solidifying it into your reality.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we'll talk about next in the diagram. And
such a good diagram. I'm excited to share this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you want to touch on maybe the concept of, the circle and inside of it being the points a little bit.
No. I think you have a better concept of it and a better understanding of it. But I mean, it goes along with what I kind of said. So first, like in what you said, visioning and alignment, that's more of that feminine energy coming up. Like what is my vision? What do I want it to look like? And what am I aligned with? What feels right? Then it goes into the masculine energy. So I'm going to figure out a plan for how I'm going to get that vision moving. And then execution and discipline, sticking with that masculine energy. And that's where those points come into play because while it is a circle, there's also those strategic points that need to be touched on. And then once the execution has taken place and that discipline, then there's the connection and magnetism, which is that feminine energy. So instead of continuing things with force, you're looking back, stepping back and saying, okay, what are we connecting with? And then finally, the reflection and alignment. That's more of the feminine energy. Thinking about what worked, what didn't work, how did that support, was that supportive for me? How did, all those questions. And then going back again to visioning and alignment after reflection. So what maybe needs to shift? What worked, what didn't work? What do you want to add?
Yeah, and I would say, for our listeners to, this diagram is displayed for us visually, but, the cycle of wealth creation is predominantly in some sort of circular object. This being the kind of container that holds the whole process. And that is, if you think about it in terms of like a home, right? Like you have the structure itself being masculine. Like you have to put the foundation, you have to put the floors and the rooms and stuff like that. But what makes it a home?
Right.
It's the nurturing, it's the femininity that comes into play, and the pictures on the wall, the candles that are burning, like those things are very intimate and they're very feminine when it comes to energy. And so the diagram itself makes total sense, with the container being, feminine and the ideas coming together inside of that container, but being able to take physical form through output.
Yeah.
And which is another huge factor for the masculine energy is just output. We're focused so much on the output, right? It's building that house. It's getting the foundation laid, the siding done, the roofing, like it's the output. But what comes after that, right? Like it's the living experience. It's living in the home,
right?
Making it a home. And
one is not better per se than the other.
Right.
Right.
You need the structure.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So, with this diagram, I think it gives you a flat out goal or outline to take each concept that you want to bring into your reality and figure out how you can implement actual strategies with each part of energy. So, with the planning aspect, that is a lot of masculine energy, and you do need that. And then kind of the nurturing part is going to be the feminine energy, and also the reflection part, where you do take time to rest and breathe after you've gotten into your brand new home. You're going to set it all up and go and design. And, some of that is creative, but the actual doing of it is going to be very masculine and structured. And then afterwards, you're going to be like, okay, I've done so much work now, and I'm just going to live here and let this be my home and be present with it. So, yeah. I think it really creates a good, design for alignment in whatever part of the process you're in with that specific idea you want to bring to life.
I really do like this diagram because I think the outside oval part expresses that flow that,
It's not linear.
Yeah. But then you look in the inside part, and to have, one has to have the other. It's more structured. Those what do you call it? Like strict lines, or those straight lines are, important to have. But it's a great diagram, and one I'm going to use it.
Yeah, it's something that you could probably put up on your wall and just be like, okay, well, just to kind of examine whatever you're going through, like, where am I at and how can I get back to here? But have I implemented any other piece?
Yeah.
And kind of like it's your own puzzle per se.
Yeah.
And you can figure it out that way.
I also love to look at it from the perspective of me versus my husband, because I know we like to joke that we kind of switch the typical gender roles. But then in certain aspects of life, like at his job, he has a lot of masculine energy, very focused on goals. And so it might be good to your point, put it up where everyone can see, so everyone can kind of reflect on it and see how and where they want to be.
Right. And I think also, to your point, a lot of people just don't know these things exist, right? This is something that we've kind of created on our own, but there's many resources out there for, people to Google or whatever, where they can see characteristics of masculine energy and feminine energy, but also the wounded sides of each, right? The shadows, they say, where it can create some sort of imbalance because you're spending too much time in the shadow of that energy versus utilizing its strengths and putting that forward, and then the strengths of the other, putting that forward, and kind of finding your balance that way versus like too much in the shadow of either one or both.
Right.
And we find that a lot with, what we mentioned last time on our previous episode was the victim abuser mentality, where they're kind of hanging out too much in the shadow of, masculine energy, where they're using that energy for negative things.
Right.
It could be as easy to think about like war or fighting or crime. That's very much in the shadows of the masculine.
Yeah.
It could be gossip or drama, something that's still connected with people on the feminine side, but it's not towards the greater good. It's not of anyone, yourself or anyone else.
Yeah, man, we're going to have a separate episode on that, because I love talking about all of this.
Yeah, it's very intriguing to see how it can play a role in your own life. But you think back about, whenever there was a circumstance that you had a conflict with somebody, and you can easily now probably from this information analyze how they were, what energy they were putting out there, and what energy you were putting out there, and how they were communicating with each other.
Yeah.
So because let's say if it was your husband at work and he was very masculine, right? Your soft, feminine, receptive energy wants to be heard and wants to be listened to and just loved and taken care for. And he's just like, no, I want to get done. I want to solve the problem. I want to analyze and rinse and repeat, and then we're done, right? So sometimes, looking back on it, you could say, well, just understanding that I want you to listen to me is going to get us a lot farther. And we were actually going to solve the problem this way. And so, just looking back on scenarios like that, it's easier to pinpoint what the steps could have been and how to change kind of from here on out. But it's a learning process. It's not set in stone.
Yeah. And the word that comes up for me is awareness. So being aware of this, because I feel like in general, the general population here is masculine, feminine, and it is male and it is female. And that is it. And to your point, a lot of masculine is found in the male, but not.
It's not everywhere.
No.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of
too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think masculine, like feminine, it almost gets like a bad rap, the feminine energy. So being aware of using both of these, we do use both of these, but whether we know it or not,
Yep.
Even though my husband is very driven at work, there's a lot of.
He still sleeps at night.
Yeah.
Still watches TV, reads, right? Like he's still allowing himself to be in his feminine a little bit.
Yes.
Maybe not as much as you would like some days, but
Touche.
sometimes it just takes a gentle reminder from our outside to say, hey, let's go on a walk or an adventure. Like, let's go get groceries at 9 p.m. on a Friday instead of 12 on a Sunday when everyone else is going. Like, just something like that, spontaneity is kind of more feminine, but
it is cool how they can complement each other too.
I agree. And I think with, this diagram, there are some good tips that we could give as far as integrating them with, if you are trying to start a business or you have a business and want to take it to the next level. There are a few key points where you can implement strategies from the diagram over. So one of them being starting with that feminine energy and the vision of what you want to create. Everything in your imagination can exist in external life. So I should say 3D life, not external, but because we are the life. But so starting with that feminine energy and creating your brand and vision that way is really a good first step.
So then looking at the masculine energy, what we talked about earlier was that structuring and that planning to make it actually happen. So the house example is great. It needs to have a strong foundation and a strong structure to stay.
Yeah, or it's going to cost you a lot of money in the end. To replace that foundation, but, or move or whatever. But yeah, definitely in order to launch that into reality, you have to have some sort of structure, right? But you don't have to stay there.
Right.
And returning back to the feminine energy after it's been put out there, right? So, a good example with us too is just cultivating our relationship based off of, okay, we have a vision as far as where our brand wants to go and our overall business, and then kind of combining it and giving ourselves a dedicated point to meet up. But then everything inside of that meetup is just like creative.
Yeah.
And we do write some notes, but we don't plan to a T because I don't know if you've noticed this in your life, but most times that you get something, or receive something unexpected, it's when you didn't plan it, it's unexpected. And so those are the best things, right? Relationships, people that come into your life, an excess of money, like you just got an amazing refund that you didn't even know existed. And so those things happen when you're not expecting it, and goes back to the force of putting that pressure on, to an outcome.
Right. And to your example earlier, like if you think back to those times where you did put pressure on yourself, the thing that you wanted to happen probably really didn't end up happening the way that you did because there was so much pressure. I love the word pressure because I just feel it on my shoulders. And when you can release that pressure, however you do that, it's just so freeing. And it's so then back to the feminine energy and flow, then things just go with the flow. They move as they should.
Like waves is another way to describe it.
Yeah.
And also the fire and fire pit analogy, I love this. mentioned before with both of the energies and how it really comes back to the feminine energy being a container for the masculine energy to do its thing, right? So the fire pit being, in this analogy, the feminine energy, and inside of it being the actual flames of the fire, and potentially like the wood or fire starter, whatever else is encompassing to that. And that being the masculine energy that's going to grow. It's going to be, I want to say hot-headed because that's kind of funny, but, just exuberant in that sense. Like it's going to go, it's going to rise, it's going to do its thing. But ultimately, if it were to project so far beyond the container and didn't realize the container, didn't acknowledge the container, it would be the tragedies that we've had in California, right? There's massive amounts of wildfires that are just tearing apart towns and being destructive. And that's the imbalance of too much masculine energy. So, a great way to put it too is also, we talked about war and that kind of thing. Like that's just a lot of ego that goes into it, and too much force, too much pressure and power and desire for control. When the feminine energy is saying like, yeah, we get that like control is a thing. You have to have some order, some rhyme and reason, right? But it's within a container, and within that container, you have space to grow and move and be flowing and do all those things that you want to do.
Yeah, it's not a confined container, right?
Right.
Like, it's not like a constricting idea. I think of masculine energy, we talk about things being done by force, and I think of more of that like destructive or tearing down energy, and the feminine energy is more of that lifting up. Again, not good or bad, but just the way that it's showcased and thought about type thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that kind of brings us to our next topic of wealth creation using both energies and how you can use both energies. So the receptiveness in the feminine energy, like what we talked about before, is that receiving of income or relationships or business building skills, and understanding that when you are receiving these things, you're not taking away anything from anybody else, which is a common misconception, right?
I need you to say that again for the people in the back, because when you explained this to me, it was very eye-opening, because I think, sorry to interrupt, but for that, like that idea of money, it's just black or white, right or wrong. But the way that you explained this from the feminine energy perspective was huge. So
it's about abundance, and that word is like murdered these days, right?
Yeah.
It's just because it's becoming, overused and stuff like that. But I think it's definitely plays a true role in this concept, because you have to understand that money is just a 3D object, right? Or a dollar per se, or a credit card balance. It's and that's not even 3D, but it's something that we can physically interpret with our senses. And so the idea of money is a concept that we cannot interpret with our senses. We can interpret with our consciousness, right? And we can relate to it through energy. And what I mean by that is that money is called currency, right? And what is currency? Currency is a current. It's flowing, right? There's a lot of things that are related to money that are related to currency as far as even language goes. Cash flow, right? A bank, a river bank.
Stop that. This is great.
Yeah. So a lot of people just don't even have the awareness of these simple language things. And so we use these for, currency, right? Flow. The current's always moving. Flow. What is that? And that's feminine energy. That's not, I'm forcing, water down because it's a dam. Like, no, it's a flow. It's a river, right? And so thinking about it from that abundant mindset is strategically different. It's more about magnetism than anything. If you can't align with that frequency of abundance, of wealth, you're never going to be able to get there by trying harder. It's not about trying harder, which is the masculine. So many of us get it wrong in today's society. It's more about being creative and being aligned and being, with that energy of currency. So what are, some practical things that you could do in your daily life that make you feel abundant, make you feel wealthy, make you feel rich in life? That's the energy that you want to embody. It's not, I'm going to, it could be somebody who is embodying, they just bought a new car and that car makes them feel great, right? It's not about the car, but it's about the feeling.
Yes.
About like a nice suit or a nice dress, a nice pair of glasses, like something that makes you feel like you, but also great.
Yeah. I read the book Get Rich, Lucky Bitch by Denise Duffield Thomas. And one thing she talked about was, the example she gave was she moved into a house and one of her dogs or kids or something threw up on the carpet. And they cleaned it up as best they could, and they just couldn't get it out. So every time she walked into the room, she would see a stain. She would see the puke stain. And they didn't want to spend the money to have the carpet properly cleaned. So she said for years, she would walk into the room and be constantly reminded of that stain. And she said she finally made the call and hired somebody to come in. She said it was $65, and they removed the stain. And then she was able to live more with that abundance mindset because she didn't have to look at that stain and feel like, either I don't want to spend the money or not good enough. Or it is about like your environment too, like whether it be people or, I have a giant hole in my wall upstairs. My child accidentally made that. And the hole's been there. And I'm reminded of like not taking care of it. And how is that transpiring in other parts of my life,
Right. Or also for your kid too. Like let's say they had an accident, they threw a ball, it hit the wall and made a hole.
Yeah.
Then they're probably feeling some element of shame or guilt because that they see that too. And you probably maybe reprimanded them for it, and now you're reminded of that, where that's all kind of like a negative experience,
right?
Probably, and being reliving that for something that happened and is done, and you've handled it, isn't necessarily the best way to move forward.
Yeah.
So spend the money is definitely another key topic. Not being afraid to put that money back in circulation.
Yes.
The amount of people that just have a scarcity mindset of how many dollars they have in their bank account are not putting that money back into circulation, right? They're scared because they are afraid of what would happen if they lost it. But they, at the same time, they don't even take the risk to put it out there. And alternatively, in technical terms, they're losing money by keeping it there because of inflation. So it's really hurting them in two ways, but the common denominator is that they don't have the awareness to understand that they're in that situation in the first place, with the scarcity lacking mindset versus abundance, saying, you know what, I'd rather have $500 in my bank account than $5,000, $50,000, right? But that being said, that money is growing in the stock market. That money is growing in real estate. I'm circulating it to my friends' businesses that are growing. And therefore, down the road, they might do business with me or help me out, or just be a support, in general.
Right.
And so I think that there's a lot of masculine energy to even holding on to money.
And fear also comes up for me. I hear fear with like, okay, I've made X amount of money. I am just going to hold on to that instead of, to your point, of circulating it and flow. Like you're living then when you're, and we were both not saying like, go and frivolously spend your money,
right?
But it's just a matter of that awareness and not living in fear.
And still spending it with intention too.
Intention.
Like you can spend it with intention, but if you think about it in what we described earlier about currency and flow, whereas if you're not spending it, you can't be in that
Right.
You can't be in that state at all because you're not in a flow. It's just stagnant. It's not going anywhere.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of that comes into play dealing with, some clients I've helped, but also people who have been afraid to be a client of mine or a client of somebody else's even. Sometimes it's not about me, but it's about, are they taking a step with somebody to help themselves? And it's kind of sad because you're like, I know that this knowledge can help you, but at the same time, you can't be the one to change them.
Right.
It has to be through a set of reoccurring circumstances, unfortunately for most people, that they'll take action to change. Whether it's a loss of a job, a loss of a family member, a loss of a relationship, anything like that. Something that gets them to a point where they're really low, like rock bottom, and then they're like, okay, now I need to change. Well, it doesn't have to be like that.
Yes, exactly. I know for me and for a lot of other people, COVID was a huge eye-opener. I looked and said, what am I doing with my life? I'm not happy. And so that was a really cool turning point. But I digress.
Yeah, I think
I like to do that.
On the flip side of things with, masculine energy and wealth creation, it can happen as well, right? It's very disciplined. It's very speedy. It's very structured. It is a little bit forceful side. If you think about some of the classic, and I frame this very lightly because if you are working, you're either in business for yourself or you're in business for somebody else, right? And business is just an exchange of that currency. Somebody is getting a service or product for the money that they put down or the time that they put in, whatever it may be. And so with that, you think about a classic salesperson, right? Because we think about sales being businessy, and it's like, okay, there's more than enough people that are male salespeople than women, right? But women close 11% higher than men do. And why is that? Because they're taking their time. They're not so focused on the outcome to where it's distracting from the actual process. And the feminine energy really focuses on the process and the creativity and the relationship building connection. And, with the masculine energy, I see it a lot. Like I said before, everyone's in business, whether it's for themselves or somebody else. And so everybody who works for somebody else is a salesperson too, whether they're a clerk, whether they're a stock person, they are helping that company sell stuff. Okay. So whether it's a service or product, and you could do it for yourself too, obviously, but there's a fear around it because people don't want to be sold per se. Right? They don't want to be forced a decision upon themselves. Yeah, they do want to be helped a lot of times, but they don't want it to be to a point where they feel like somebody is making the decision for them. And when it comes to, feminine energy on the flip side of things, it helps to have that openness and that connectedness, like you said, to just allow for that person to really share their thoughts and everything like that to help them make the decision.
Right.
And so I think the common misconception is that that's what that's what sales is. When in reality, it's just business, and everybody is in business if they're working.
Yeah.
So if you want to switch now to how you can create, some practical steps for the next part of feminine versus masculine energy, and we'll wrap up after that.
Sure. So there's a few things that we talked about that we could do is build a magnetic brand. So using storytelling, vulnerability, emotional connection to create a brand that people actually feel and they feel connected to. So, and feminine energy also helps others see you and your humanity. And they buy because they trust you. So what's the why behind your work?
The why behind my work is that I love what I do because I get to work on myself and help other people at the same time.
That's powerful.
So, by doing something like this, I'm able to voice my opinions and my studies and things that really spark me. But at the same time, I get to help other people. And so that's a win-win in my book.
Yeah.
And I just enjoy it. So I'd rather be doing something that I enjoy than not putting all my skills to use, but also reaping any rewards from doing something maybe potentially for somebody else that has no benefit for me, because I want to feel good, and then therefore in turn I can help more people feel good.
Yeah, I can't think of the word that I was just gonna say. Well, authentic. Like you're just doing it as you,
right?
And
I get that a lot. People ask me like, "How do you do everything?" Or like she's just a go-getter per se, or like you just do it and it just happened. It's like, yeah, because I just envision it and I just do it, like embodying both energies there. But it's just something that I feel aligned with, and I know that if it feels right to me and intuitive, then I'm going to do it. Or if it's calling me per se. Yeah. Versus like go-getter in a term as chasing, but not in a way that feels it's like chasing by design, not like force.
Yeah. I think that's why I feel so like driven towards your energy, because it is kind of like that mix of both. And it's also confidence, but in a way that you don't really let other people in those other voices of you should do it this way, you shouldn't do it that way. You do it the way that you authentically want to show up as.
Right.
And, we've talked about this. Some things you're like, yeah, it works out how I want it. And other things, maybe it doesn't all the time, but you don't let that knock you down. You just keep going. So,
yeah, I think like you can stray away a little bit from the path, and that's good because you get to experience different things and experiment with different things. And that in turn can help you down the line. So yeah, but I definitely have like a North Star kind of thing. Like, okay, this is where I know I can get to. But it's just like how to get there. And it's not really my goal to figure that out. It's through, what skills can I build? What relationships can I build that are going to help me get to that point? Whatever that is. And it's not even like I want to get to a point, right? It's, I want to get to experiences.
Yeah.
I want to experience this. Like, I want to experience speaking on stage in front of people. I want to experience making music and putting that out there, and, having a successful business, all these things, right? And there's not like a defined path for any way to get there, but that's not my job to figure out. It's the universe, greater good, God, whatever you want to call it.
And I also think you also don't like shut people out either. You're very open. And so I think that energy also attracts people to you. You're not exclusive. Like, I'm Jessica. There's only a limited amount of people who have access to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, because then you think about it too from a personal perspective, like that's somebody that I could very much help or collaborate with.
Exactly.
And in turn, they won't receive the help that they might need, but also I won't get to experience them. And so it's kind of like a lose-lose in that situation if you're closed off.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we kind of addressed this, but attract clients through alignment. I mean, touched on that greatly. When you're operating from a place of alignment and joy, you naturally attract those clients who are ideal for you. The feminine energy turns you into a magnet, not a hunter. I think this has been true for me in my coaching business. I found at the beginning, I attracted a lot of, for lack of a better term, like dud clients. Book Yourself Salad. That's a great book. And he talks about dud clients because that was the energy that I was kind of putting out, like that needy energy of I need to find clients and I just need to do it a certain way so that I can be successful. And it's only through the process of learning and growing in a business that I've learned that I need to be in alignment with myself so then I can attract those clients that we can, to your point, win-win. Like we can both win from working together. Yeah. So I know we got limited time because we love to talk.
Always do.
So back to your point of the wealth aspect, charge in a way that feels abundant. I know pricing can be very, very tricky for a lot of people. You know, what are you worth? You're getting outside opinions as to what you should charge. You're feeling a certain way because clients contact you and, well, that's too much. I can't afford that. You know, a lot of different things come into play. But using that feminine energy, it allows you to price based on your values and your energetic exchange, not that fear or that scarcity. And you invite clients to respect your worth, which I think is huge. And it goes back to alignment. So,
yeah, I agree. And I think back to the price side, you have to give yourself the ability to receive the amount of money that you're asking for. If you don't feel comfortable asking for that amount of money, then you haven't grown into the person that is able to receive that amount of money. Right. So if you think that giving, receiving a $20,000, $30,000 check is too much for you right now, what are the skills and, things you can learn, habits that you can adopt that somebody who would be able to receive $30,000 checks is doing? Yeah. What are they doing? What are they listening to? What are they watching? What are they reading? What are they doing with their body? Nutrition, exercise, what do their relationships look like? What does their work schedule look like? All of that comes into play when being able to receive that amount of money. So you have to be that person. And stemming back from our last episode of identity, you have to envision that person and then become that person, and then you'll receive that money. It's not, even if you did receive it, let's say when you didn't feel like you were worthy of it, then it wouldn't last long, or it would be taken away, or you'd have some sort of incident that you might have to pay for with that money. And so it's not going to stay to help you overall, maybe as long, or you're not going to use it to what you'd want to use it for, just because you don't know how to hold it as the container.
Yeah, it's huge. And going back to what you said about the envisioning, kind of like with identity, it's that feminine energy. Think about like who you want to be and what that looks like. And then the masculine is putting that into practice, Is that reading different books? Is that going for a walk, working out in a different way? Is that, not being surrounded by the people that you are surrounded by? Lots of different things. So maybe do you want to do 4 or 5? Which one do you like better?
I think number 5 really sets a tone for me because, nurturing relationships over transactions. This is something I see every single day in my line of work, where the structure even of the firms that I deal with, right? They're based off of numbers. They're based off of credits. They're based off of sales and stuff like that. And to me, none of that matters, right? It's the lagging effect of my success, right? It's not the indicator of where I want to go. And that just shows the overall industry of being very, very masculine, and just, business in general, very masculine. But, when there's those metrics, it definitely puts the transactions in the forefront of our society. And being in your feminine energy allows you to nurture relationships over that and ultimately receive more.
Well, this has been a great discussion, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. So remember, your journey to empowered abundance continues on our next episode. Thanks for listening to the Vibe and Shine podcast. Keep shining bright.